What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel, not welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed unless, of course, you just don't like nice things. And if that's the case, then girl, you are not alone. As you may or may not know, the beyond belief, like fact or fiction type videos are one of my favorites here on my channel. And I know a lot of you guys like it too because people have been asking, girl, when it's going to be the next one. And I didn't realize it's been a month since I did one. Definitely was not intentional to go that long. But here we are today, and we are well overdue. Now, if this is your first fact or fiction video, it is modeled after the TV show, of course, Beyond Belief Fact or Fiction, where they show or tell like 3 to 4 different stories, some of which are real life events, and some of them are just straight from the writer's imagination. And you have to determine which one could be true and which one of those might just be a figment of someone's imagination. At the end of the episode, they of course tell you which ones were real, which ones were false, and you get to gauge your judgment. If you guys are unfamiliar with the show and you would like to check it out, I believe they have all seasons on Amazon Prime. It's a really cool show. Like my aunt and I used to watch this every Friday, and we used to challenge each other to see which one of us can guess the most correct answers. Now, the same as with the TV show, some details have been changed just because I know some of y'all, a lot of y'all, most of y'all are true crime connoisseurs, okay? It's so hard to get a case that is in fact true past y'all's little radar. Y'all be knowing all the cases. So I have to switch some things up about the story, but about 90% of it is in line with what actually happened. Like it may be a city or a year changed. Of course, the names are changed. Little things like that, but not the timeline of events itself. And so without further ado, let's just get into story number 1. You guys, I said before that I wanted to try like the little gelled up eyebrow look. And one of the PR packages I received from e.l.f., they actually sent me the brow lift cream. And so I'm gonna go ahead and try that right now. Let's see if this works, shall we? In 1994, 32-year-old Ashley Tate decides to leave her hometown of New York for a more quiet and calm environment. She saves up her money for months preparing for the move, and she is very excited to be in a new surrounding, ready to meet all new people. So when her lease expires, she relocates to the quiet suburb of Suwanee, Georgia, which I may have just said wrong. We just gonna pretend I did not, if I did in fact say that wrong. She had chosen Swanee because she felt like it would give her a nice, much needed break from the fast-paced NY life and also the traumas of her past that had continued to haunt her. Now, in order to battle these here demons, she had tried therapy. She had also attempted to confront the person that was responsible for said traumas. And although both of these helped her somewhat, she still continued to struggle with it beyond her level of comfort. So she figured that a change of scenery would be worth the shot and could very well be good for her. And this choice proved to be a good one at first. She is not that far from Atlanta, and she spends most of her weekends there participating in the nightlife and the social scene, enjoying all of the things that Atlanta has to offer. Atlanta is real cute. I lived there once for a very short time. She quickly finds employment, and at first, everything is going really well for her. She could not be any happier with her decision. The only thing that she was missing about living in New York was being in close proximity with her sister, her twin sister, Amanda. Now, the two of them were not that close, and they hadn't been since high school, but they were just like regular siblings. There was no animosity between them, no bad blood. They had just grown apart after high school and became more like just normal siblings who have their own lives and catch up when they have the time. But the distance is making her miss her twin. As for the rest of their family, her father was never really in the picture, and their mother had passed away about 8 years prior to her move. But neither her nor her sister had a good relationship with their mother either. So they are essentially the only family that they have. Things are going really well for Ashley until one night while leaving the bar, She is involved in a terrible car accident. Now, this was no fault to her. She was not driving under the influence or anything like that. And she was hurt pretty badly. The accident leaves her in a coma. Now, Amanda comes down to Georgia immediately to take care of her sister and be by her side because there was nobody else that would do it. She had made a couple of friends in Atlanta, but they were not that close to where they would be there day in and day out at the hospital, giving her the support that she needed. And Amanda stays at the hospital day and night, sitting by her sister's side, anxiously waiting for Ashley to show some sign of improvement, which takes a while, but after several weeks of waiting, she finally witnesses the moment that she had been waiting for. Ashley awakes from her comatose state. Now, initially, Amanda is ecstatic, right? Because this sounds like a really good sign, of course. But her excitement is very short-lived when she realizes that not only does Ashley not have any recollection of the accident itself, she does not remember her twin, nor does she remember anything about herself or who she is. Now, the doctors inform Amanda that this is pretty normal and that her memory could be foggy for a little bit now, but it will very likely come back to her over time. There is no guarantee that it will. And for now, the most important thing is for her to get some rest. Then when it's time, they can do some activities and exercises that will help try to jog her memory. After a couple of days, Ashley begins to feel as though she might remember Amanda, but it is more so a feeling of familiarity. She doesn't remember particular past experiences or many personal details about her twin, just her name and their bond. And she still does not remember a thing about herself. None of her personal details, her favorite color, her favorite food, none of that has come back to her. But that is okay, because her sister Amanda has committed to helping her. She even reaches out to a friend back in New York and has her mail a package with a bunch of old photos of the two of them that she had hoped would help the situation and help Ashley remember things. But unfortunately, it's not that effective. And as time goes on, Ashley really doesn't show any signs of improvement as far as her memory. She has, however, made huge strides as far as reestablishing a routine and getting into the habit of caring for herself and, going on about her life, piecing her new little life together. Now, with Amanda's entire life back in New York still, that she really, really needs to get back to, they decide that it probably would be best that Ashley return to New York with Amanda, seeing as though she doesn't have anybody else out there in the Atlanta area. And once they get back home, Amanda can, of course, return back to her duties and continue to help her sister try to get back on track and back in the swing of, being an adult. Now, although Ashley is not remembering much, she doesn't have any difficulty retaining information. So once Amanda teaches her something, she really catches on quickly and retains the information well. But one thing that Amanda is noticing is the fact that her sister's demeanor, like her entire demeanor, is different, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. Now, on one hand, she does miss her sister and her personality as it was, but the fact that Ashley is noticeably a lot happier and more at peace is something that Amanda is extremely grateful for. But child, when you can't remember nothing, what really do you have to be upset about? Aside from the frustration of not being able to remember your life, I guess. The more Amanda thinks about her sister's inability to remember anything about their past, the more she becomes convinced that this is more of a good thing than a bad thing. Maybe it's best that Ashley does not remember anything from their past and she can finally be free of all of the things about it that haunted her and prevented her from moving on and just living her best life as an adult. So coming to this little realization of this idea, Ashley decides to omit certain things about their childhood and Ashley's past to essentially rewrite her history for her. She felt like it was the right thing to do. And I mean, what harm could it really bring, right? If she could somehow magically have some of these memories erased from her mind, she would opt for it, child. She would pay for it if she could. But unfortunately for her, this was not an option. And it is, however, an option for her sister. And so for the next 6 months, she paints this beautiful picture of their childhood together and how great Ashley's life was going for her up until, the accident. And although she was essentially mourning the loss of her sister as she had once known her, her, she is still able to enjoy this version of Ashley and establish a close bond similar to the one that they had shared as children. Then Ashley begins having these very vivid dreams about the two of them as children. And at first, she believed them to just be nightmares, but for the life of her, she could not rationalize why her subconscious mind would produce nightmares so horrific and disturbing in nature. Like, of all the things, I could fall off a cliff, be chased by a bear, but this is what you come up with? And after about one or two of these dreams, she tells Amanda about these dreams, and Amanda is just like, at first, honey, she is panicking on the inside because she's like, what if her memories are coming back? How would she react to knowing that I have been lying to her all of this time? Even if I explained to her my intent, would she be appreciative of it? Would she be upset about it still because she depended on me and child just been sitting up here lying all of this time? Like, what is going to be the outcome of this? Whatever her reaction was going to be, Amanda was not trying to find out what it would be today, okay? And so instead of coming clean in this moment, she decides to just go with the flow, brush it off as strange, and suggest that it's possibly a result of, something maybe she ate before bed that caused these weird, strange dreams. But these dreams continue, and as they become more frequent, Ashley begins to question whether or not these are just dreams or actual memories. And if that is the case, then the person that she has been living with for all of these months and depending on has been lying to her the entire time. And if that's the case, why wouldn't she come clean when she mentioned the dreams in the first place? This alone makes her feel like she cannot trust Amanda. And if she wanted to know the truth, she would have to find a really creative way to get it out of her, because she obviously cannot just straight up ask her if she's a liar. In one of said dreams, her mother wore this red fur coat. In Ashley's mind, if she could somehow validate that this coat was actually a thing and did exist, she would be right that these are actually memories and not really dreams. And she did not feel like it was a good idea to just flat out ask her sister about this red coat. So she brings it up as if it was previously mentioned in one of the stories that Amanda had told her about their past. She goes to Amanda and she's just like, hey, you remember that fur coat you said mom loved so much? Who got to keep it when she passed? Amanda, believing that she had in fact mentioned this coat to her, because how else would she have known about it, right? Without any kind of delay at all, Amanda comes right out with a response, telling her that each of them had wanted the coat. And so to decide who got to keep it, they actually flipped a coin just to find out in the end that the fur wasn't even real. Ashley's plan works like a charm, but she is stunned at how quickly and with how much ease that Amanda has produced this whole story. It was so convincing to her that for a moment she began to question, like, maybe that really did happen. Even with how things played out in our past, maybe this is true. But whether it happened or not still does not change the fact that this is proven that Amanda has been lying to her this entire time. And so she decides to waste no time and go ahead and confront her sister about that right then and there. Amanda defends herself by saying that she definitely, had the best of intentions and that she meant no harm. She felt like her sister would be better off, all of the reasons why that I explained earlier in the story, hoping that she would be cut some sort of slack for her good intentions. But you know what they say about the road to hell, child, is paved with them. And Ashley is not trying to hear any of the things, honey. She demands that Amanda tells her what kind of childhood they really had, and she wanted to hear it right now. And so Amanda reveals the very dark truth about their past that she had been trying to shield her sister from. From birth, the two of them had been pretty much inseparable, and as children had grown particularly close and dependent upon each other for comfort, something they were not receiving outside of each other. And instead of being this Susie homemaker great mother that she had made Ashley believe that they had, their mother was a very cold and calloused woman who showed the girls very little affection and never truly wanted them. She herself struggled with substance abuse issues and had supported herself and her habit with sex work prior to becoming pregnant with the twins. Now, once she had given birth, it became a lot more difficult to balance her work life, her social life, and motherhood. And many of her regular clients had moved on to other women by the end of the 6-week period that her office space was out of commission. She resented her daughter for the ways in which they inconvenienced her and how much more she had to work in order to be able to provide for the now 3 of them. But at the same time, their presence is what's keeping her from being able to work more. And what Amanda was really trying to keep from her sister is the fact that in order to make up for the money that she was now losing because of them, their mother had begun selling them from very young up until about the age of 14 to men who were into minors. So most of the childhood that she wanted to keep from her sister really consisted of a lot of abuse and a lot of emotional, mental, and physical torture. This is the reason why they did not have a good relationship with their mother before she passed, and what had continued to haunt Ashley for most of her adult life. Amanda, of course, apologizes and tells her that, she, of course, only had the best intentions when she decided to keep this truth from her. And unfortunately for Ashley, she really was better off not knowing, because this caused her to need a whole lot of therapy. She was basically back to square one. And after being told the horrific truth of how her life had really gone, the dreams stop and nothing else really comes back to her. And Amanda commits to telling her the truth from here on, really telling her the truth about the past without altering anything. I'm very interested to know how you guys will react if you were in either situation. If you were the twin in the accident, would you have wanted to know this about your past? Would you have been upset finding out that you had been lied to and this was the past? Or would you be like, okay, girl, yeah, I get what you were trying to do here? And if you were the twin that was responsible for retelling history, would you try to protect your sibling from their horrible past? Or would you have told him the truth? Because I feel like waking up out of a coma, having been in an accident, child, you're under enough stress. And so how am I supposed to now drop this on you? I don't know. But then who are me to rewrite your history, right? I feel like there are a lot of valid arguments that could be made on either side. Now on to story number 2. The children have awakened, and so you may see them wandering through the background because they feel like they have to be seen. With every video, at some point, you are going to see their little ears in the background or a little head pop up. Child, they are determined for y'all to see them. Rose has been married to her husband for 26 years when he decides that he is going to leave her for his mistress that he has been seeing for the past 6 months. Now, he and Rose have 2 children together, and she recently found out that she is pregnant with their 3rd. She has also been a stay-at-home mom for the entirety of their relationship and marriage, and so she does not have a job to now be a single mother and take care of these kids on her own. She has some money, but it is not nearly enough to cover the household expenses for a long period of time. And furthermore, being pregnant, she fears that no one is going to want to hire her if she does find a job. And even when she does find a job, she would have to go out in a couple of months and be off for a couple of months after that to give birth and take care of her newborn. So she is left in a pretty difficult situation. And her husband tells her that he will help her for about 2 months, but after that, it will be up to her to get a job and financially maintain the household, and he would just help her with the kids' necessities. But he makes it very clear that he will not continue to financially support her 100% after the 2 months are up. And get this, he does not file for divorce because he knows that the courts will order him to pay spousal support as well as child support for their 3 children. Now, Rose also knows this, but unfortunately for her, she cannot afford to file for divorce. And so she is pretty much just stuck in this agreement or arrangement until she can somehow get the funds to do so. And in an effort to support her family, she relies on the one skill that she has that she knows she could generate some income from, and begins selling homemade meals in the neighborhood. Now, this is something that really works for her because she can work from home, of course, and be there to continue taking care of her children. It's not all that strenuous on her as a pregnant woman, but it's also something that she can do right up until labor and quickly get back to after giving birth. It's also something that she really enjoys doing, and people enjoy her food just as much as she enjoys making it. A lot of her customers are repeat customers, very loyal, and were very consistent in their support of her, especially considering her circumstances, which were very well known and gossiped about around the neighborhood. Now, among these loyal customers of hers is this very wealthy woman who does not live in the neighborhood, but she has a child who attends a private school that is in the area. And so she comes and begins purchasing food from Rose, telling her how she had heard about how good her cooking was, and she too becomes a regular customer who comes by at least twice a week, each time overpaying and insisting that Rose keeps the change. Now let's give the lady a name so I can stop saying the woman. Mrs. Stevenson is very nice every time she comes. And one day while Rose is in the grocery store shopping for her, her work supplies, she runs into Mrs. Stevenson, who is there in the store with her husband. Now, at first, Rose sees them and she was not going to interrupt them or, walk up and introduce herself. She had just taken notice of them being in the store. But when Mrs. Stevenson spots Rose, she immediately calls out her name. She approaches her with her husband and introduces Rose to her husband, who is also very nice. He tells Rose about how much his wife has told him about her cooking, how much she loves Rose's food, and jokingly suggests that she come by the house sometime to teach his wife how to cook because she cannot. Poor Mrs. Stevenson had been many things in her day, but a good cook was not one of them. And here her husband is exposing her in the produce section of the grocery store. She may not be able to cook, but she does have a good little sense of humor. The three of them laugh it off. And then Mrs. Stevenson suggests that Rose seriously consider coming by to cook for them sometime, to be paid, of course. And Rose is more than happy to do so because, she does need the money. Mrs. Stevenson explains to her that they have family coming to town and she does not want to be burdened with the task of cooking for all of these people and also having to clean up all of these dishes behind all of them. And she figures if she's going to hire a caterer, why not hire Rose? She already knows she loves Rose's food, and she also knows that Rose is a single mother and figured that for that reason she could use a little extra cash. Right there in the store, she makes Rose an offer of $1,500 for her services plus the cost of grocery. And Rose is like, girl, when do you need this food? Like, just let me know. And so at this point, Mrs. Stevenson tells her that she expects it to be a total of 10 of them, 10 guests. Rose has free range to make whatever she wants to make. They are not picky. They trust her 100%. They're needing her to cook 2 days from now, and so she goes ahead and gives Rose the food allowance, which is $700, and tells her that if there is any money left over, she can in fact keep the change. Now Rose makes it to the house. She knocks on the door and she is greeted by a young man who looks to be about maybe early 30s. And he doesn't even greet her. He just stares at her like, what are you doing here? She introduces herself. She tells him that she is there to cook. And then Mrs. Stevenson comes in, introduces the young man as her cousin, and shows her right away to the kitchen. She immediately makes it very clear to Rose that she is not to leave the kitchen, pretty much. Upstairs is completely off limits. There's a bathroom down the hall, but aside from that little bathroom and the kitchen, you are not to roam throughout the house. It wasn't the request itself, but the amount of times that Mrs. Stevenson repeated that she is not to go beyond the kitchen that strikes her as odd. And she must have sensed Rose's feelings or, her uneasiness, because she immediately offers an explanation. Her aunt is upstairs sick in one of the bedrooms and they are unsure if it is contagious or not. And so to avoid Rose potentially becoming ill, they are limiting her to the kitchen for her own safety. Now, Rose is still a little bit uneasy, but she's there to do a job that is paying her quite well. And so she brushes it off and gets to work. Besides, this is their home and she has no issue whatsoever respecting their wishes. She's only there to cook anyway, so what else does she need beyond the kitchen, right? Now, while cooking, Rose cannot help but notice how quiet this house is, considering the fact that it has 10 occupants. In fact, she has only seen Mrs. Stevenson and the cousin. And after being introduced, he returned to the living room to watch television like he'd been doing before she had arrived. By the time she finished cooking, she had not seen anyone else, heard anyone else. And so she goes to the living room where the cousin is and tells him that she is done and that he can call for the rest of the family. She then offers to help set the table, and he immediately seems very agitated and lets her know that that would not be necessary. That instead of everyone coming down to eat at the table, they would in fact be eating upstairs in their rooms. Something else that was a little odd, but still she offers to help make the plates and take them upstairs. He very quickly tells her no. And at this point, she is like, well, hell, I guess my job here is done. She is then paid, thanked for her services, and ushered toward the front door, still having only seen Mrs. Stevenson, the cousin, and only ever hearing the television. The following day, Mrs. Stevenson comes by the house to purchase a plate and thank her again for coming by and cooking for them. She tells them how much everybody enjoyed her food and presents her a nice little proposition. She would come by and cook dinner for the family twice a week, and they would of course pay her. Rose accepts, and 2 nights out of every week, she would travel to the Stevenson house, cook dinner for the family, and each time is like the first. The plates are made and to be taken upstairs to the bedrooms, and she is hastily dismissed. The only thing that was different, she noticed that each time she went, the number of guests that she would be cooking for changes. Like it would fluctuate. Now, initially, she thought that it was because the guests that they had from out of town had gone away. But she notices even within the same week, the number is not the same. Sometimes there are 7 people she's cooking for. Sometimes there are 6. Sometimes it's like 11 people she's cooking for. It was just so weird that the number was never consistent. And she got this really eerie, creepy feeling each time she entered the house that stuck with her the entire time that she was there cooking. She just felt like something was not quite right, but the money was great, and so she pushes these uneasy feelings to the back of her mind and continues to show up and cook for them. A few other things that she had taken notice of was the fact that there was always a car parked right out front, like near the driveway, and there was always a man sitting in the driver's seat who never said anything. He was just literally just sitting there every time that she come by. He would be there when she got there and still be there when she left. She had also noticed that sometimes random people would be leaving the house as she was coming, and sometimes on her way out, there would be again more people coming in. But rarely did she see the same people twice. There was always new faces coming and going. And honey, if that is not strange enough, one evening while she is preparing dinner and the house is otherwise silent, she hears the faint sounds of a woman crying, and it's quite obvious that these cries are coming from upstairs. She pauses for a minute to listen to make sure she is not, imagining things. And when she becomes still, she hears the cries. Now they're faint and they're slightly muffled, but they're still very obvious and loud enough to hear. She walks into the living room where the cousin is, and he is just there seated on the furniture looking down at his phone as if he doesn't hear anything. He has no reaction to the sounds of this woman crying. It's as if he just doesn't hear a thing, but the TV is not on and there is literally no other noise being made. So she knows for a fact that he has to hear it. After a few more seconds, the crying stops completely, and she returns to the kitchen and gets back to work, figuring that it might have just been Mrs. Stevenson. Maybe she is up there having a little breakdown, a little moment, and it's best that she just, mind her business. Even though she felt within her little spirit that that was not Mrs. Stevenson that she was hearing. Now, the next time that she is at the house cooking for them, she is disrupted by the sound of a male's voice, this time crying. Moments after the house goes quiet, Mr. Stevenson enters the kitchen, slightly out of breath, and tells her to make enough food for one more person. He also has a very noticeable cut above his eye. And at this point, even though the money is really good, she decides to follow her gut and end this agreement. She does not know what they have going on up in there, but it obviously could not be anything good, judging by what she's been hearing and just the feeling that she gets and how strange they've been acting. She tells Mr. Stevenson that although she is greatly appreciative of the opportunity, unfortunately, this will be the last time that she will be coming by to cook for the family. Now, Ms. Rose thought this was going to be it, and that the worst of it was the fact that she would no longer be getting all of this extra good money coming in. She is completely taken aback and horrified when he responds by telling her that she will in fact, continue their arrangement, and that her life and the lives of her children depend on it. Very different from the nice Mr. Stevenson cracking joke by the apples down at Aldi's. And then Mrs. Stevenson, who had obviously been listening nearby, enters the kitchen and suggests that they just go ahead and kill her right then and there. Now, the husband, he says no to this, and Rose is relieved until she hears his alternate idea, which is that they keep her there in the house and not only force her to continue to cook for them, but also live there in the house with them full time. Now, she brings up the fact that she has young children. She cannot just move in with them. And he tells her that she will be allowed one phone call to a family member or someone that she trusts to come by and care for her children in her absence, because she won't even be leaving today. Like, this is it. She is stuck. She calls her sister and tells her what they told her to tell the sister, which is that she had accepted this last minute great opportunity out of town and had to leave right away. The money was just too good to pass up, and she really needed her sister to come move into her home and take care of the kids in her absence. She does not definitively say how long she expects to be gone, but the sister assumes that maybe this is like a couple days, a week at the most, and the sister agrees to go to the house and look after the kids in her absence. After the phone call, the cousin is instructed to escort her upstairs to her room where she'd be staying, which was a very small room that only had this little cot and a lamp. She is told that when she is not cooking, she is to spend all of her time in that room and not, under any circumstances, go exploring the rest of the home. From that moment on, each time she saw the cousin or Mr. or Mrs. Stevenson, they were armed. And there is also someone who is armed watching her at all times. Most time it's the cousin. Now, having traveled further into the home, she gets the full scope of what is going on inside. The Stevensons were actually sex traffickers, and it was not their family that she had been cooking for all of this time. It's actually the women and the young men that they have held captive inside of their home. The car parked outside in the driveway that always had this guy sitting in it was actually someone standing watch or standing guard of the home. And the cousin was also like a guard who made sure that, nothing went wrong. He was like the right-hand man to the Stevensons. 2 months go by without Rose being allowed to leave their home once. She worried more for her children than anything, but she could not risk their lives by taking any chances. She, of course, also wondered what her sister could be thinking, because she has not heard from her in over 2 months. She has no idea what is going on in her household. But over the 2 months, they had been giving her pictures of her oldest son walking home from school, or the young child playing outside and the sister hanging laundry out front. And they gave her these pictures not to be nice, but as a scare tactic to let her know, look, if you get out of line, we know where you live, we know where your kid goes to school, we know all of these things. So keep their lives in mind with every decision you try to make. Over time, she becomes increasingly depressed, and she spends most of the time that she has alone in her room crying, sobbing. She has now become one of the noises of the house that she would hear from downstairs in the kitchen. She was in a very, very bad space mentally and emotionally. She has no idea how long this is going to go on, if they will in fact just let her go one day, because why would they? She's seen their faces. She now knows what is going on inside the house. All of these things are going through her mind all of the time. And one day, while she is in the room crying, the cousin comes in, very visibly armed, and he tells her to get up, and he walks her downstairs. He takes her into the garage and instructs her to get into the back seat of his tinted out vehicle. And the cousin, of course, has never been nice to her. So she is very, very afraid that this might be the end. Has he been given instructions to take me out back and shoot me? What is about to happen? But she does what she is asked because, like I said, he's armed. They get into the car, he begins to drive, and he does not say a word. They are just riding in silence. She has no clue where they are going, and she is too afraid to ask because the cousin is, of course, an asshole. But then the surroundings begin to look familiar, and the cousin pulls into the driveway of her home. He tells her that she is to tell her sister and her children that all is well, that she is enjoying this job, and that going forward she would visit the home once a week. He then hands her a thick little stack of money to pay her sister for keeping the kids, to cover the household expenses, and tells her that she only has 15 minutes before she is to be back in this car. He also warns her that he purposely brought her here while her oldest son is at school, and that if she does anything suspicious, he'd never make it home. Now, Mr. Cousin here has actually begun to feel bad for Rose, and behind his family's back has decided to take her on these brief weekly visits. She visits with her younger child, she packs some of the essentials that she needs, she thanks her sister, and within the time allotted, she is back inside the vehicle. This does brighten up her demeanor a little bit. She continues cooking and trying her best to ignore all of the horrible sounds she'd hear coming from the other rooms. She is several months in before she actually sees the face of one of their victims, when she overhears news coverage about a woman who had been missing for weeks and had finally been discarded in a field. When she hears this, she walks into the living room to take a look at the screen, and there she sees the young woman's face, and she is immediately sick and nauseous at the sight of her. Although she had never seen this woman inside of the house, she knows without a shadow of a doubt that this was their doing. As time goes on, she begins losing hope that she would ever be released from their grips, and begins adapting to her new way of living, because at least now she can visit weekly with her children. And they had actually begun to give her a little more freedom, if you can call it that, because she was escorted everywhere she went. They would allow her to go do her grocery shopping herself, but she would always be accompanied by one of their guards. She'd always be given $1,500 to shop for the week, and each time they would allow her to keep the change, which she would take on her weekly trips home and give to her sister. Things weren't necessarily good, but they weren't as bad as they once were. They progressively began to trust her more and more. They actually began allowing her to not only cook for their victims, but also be the one to take the food up there to them. She is instructed to never speak to them. Even if the girls make an effort to speak to her, she is not to respond or say anything. She was always curious to know who the women were, but actually seeing them just made it even more real. It made her feel so bad for them, especially when they would try to talk to her or ask her for help and she could not respond. She wanted so badly to be able to say, look, girl, I'm being held captive too. I can't help you because I can't even help me. Okay? Like, I am not in on this. I am also a hostage. She did not want them to think for a second that she had anything to do with this, or any hand in, what was going on and what was happening to them. But at the same time, she knows very well that she is always being watched and listened to. And so she cannot voice these thoughts and feelings at all. She just has to drop off the food and keep it moving. But she somewhat felt that they knew that she was not in on it, because they would be very nice to her. They would thank her for the food. They would compliment the food, which of course made her feel even worse for them. Some of the girls would be there for a while. Some of them would only be there for just a couple of days. And once they were gone, she never would see them again. Same with the guys as well. Every time she would find that one of them was no longer inside the house, she knew that something terrible had happened to them, and she felt horribly about it. It's like as soon as things become a little bit more tolerable, they introduce another aspect that makes her stay there just unbearable. One random day out of the week, the cousin approaches her and tells her that he is going to take her home. And he says this out loud, and she is like, ain't nobody supposed to know, like, what are you doing? At least that's how she's feeling in her head. But instead of asking questions, she just remains confused and gets in the car as she is instructed to do. It is explained to her that the Stevensons now want to allow her to go home one day out of every week, and she will be able to actually spend the entire day and spend the night with her kids. He gives her a little burner phone and tells her that she will receive a phone call the following morning between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m., letting her know that they are on their way to pick her up and what time she should expect the car. She is ecstatic and she cherishes these trips home. She is extremely grateful for this opportunity to spend more time with her kids. And she is never picked up any later than about 9:30 the following morning. But one day, Rose gets dropped off at home and she does not receive that phone call the following morning. 8 o'clock comes and goes, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and she does not hear a word from the Stevensons, nor does a car show up for her. And before she knows it, that one day at home turns into 2. And by that evening, Rose decides to go to the house on her own, fearing that somehow this might be a test. What if they're testing her to see what she would do in this sort of situation, and her not returning to the house is the wrong answer to said test? When she arrives to the home, the entire house is surrounded by police officers and squad cars, and she does not say a thing. She tiptoes backwards away from the scene and returns back to her own home. She then turns on the news, and there she sees that someone had tipped off the police about what the Stevensons had been up to, and the Stevensons, their cousin, and several of their guards had all been arrested and their hostages had been set free. Now, one would assume that little Rose would be excited about this, but she was actually terrified. She becomes hysterical, fearing that the Stevensons would believe that she had betrayed them on her day off, because obviously somebody had tipped off the police. And she was very terrified that they would somehow retaliate against her. She also feared that the police might be looking for her as well, being as though she was always there in the house and the people who had been rescued had seen her face literally every day. Finally, she opens up to her sister and tells her the truth about where she had been and what was really going on over at the Stevenson home. Hearing the truth about what was really going on, her sister urges her to go right down to the police station and give a statement stating her side and her experience with them, so they can know that she was in fact also a victim, and she can ensure that her name is clear and that she is not being searched for out here in these streets. They take her statement and inform her that should any more information be needed, or if they needed her to testify in court or help identify anyone, that she would be contacted by the police. She returns home hoping that she never ever gets that phone call and she could just move on with her life. Unfortunately, even though she does not ever get contacted by the police and asked to do any of this, she is still in fear that they believe that she is the one that tipped off the police. And so she takes her children and her sister and they move to a different state. Now, there will only be those 2 stories in today's video because those stories were pretty long. So let's see how you did. Story number 1, the twins, who one of which loses her memory and is relying heavily on the other twin, who decides to rewrite her entire past. If you guess that this actually happened, you would be right. This is a true story, and as bad as it is in the slightly altered version that I told, the actual story is a lot worse. The twins are actually men. The Netflix documentary Tell Me Who I Am tells this horror story of Alex and Marcus Lewis, one of which loses their memory and the other takes on the task of teaching his twin about their life, omitting the horrific things that their mother did to them from infancy all the way up to 14 years of age. Then, of course, the brother begins to remember things on his own. And I have not watched the documentary. I've only read about the story online. But if you are interested in the story, by all means, you should check it out. And story number 2, about Rose being caught up with the sex trafficker's child who swept in and just made her life a living hell. If you guessed that this story was a figment of my imagination and just made up, then you would be wrong. This one actually happened as well, unfortunately. Both of them are unfortunate truths. Now, the woman's name is unknown and her identity is being concealed for, of course, her protection, obvious reasons, right? But in a documentary on Amazon Prime titled Kidnapped, she sits down and gives a full account of everything that transpired. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, which I'm pretty sure that it does, this documentary was filmed in 2017, and she said that literally up until then, she was still living in fear that they were after her and were still going to send somebody to do something to her or her kids, which is unfortunate that she is still having to live in fear. I cannot imagine. But yeah, that pretty much sums up today's video. Please do not forget to give the video a thumbs up on your way out. Share the video with a friend. Subscribe if you have not. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace. Now, if this is your first, my hands are so ashy. I smell everything. I don't know if I'm supposed to fill these in first or gel them down or not gel them down. What did I say? I don't know if I'm supposed to fill these in first then gel them down, but I imagine that would be very messy. I probably don't even need to fill them in once I gel them down. Let's just gel them and see. In 1994, 34-year, okay, no, she was not 34. Or was she? I feel like edge control for my eyebrows. Child, I don't know which one is laid better, my edges or my eyebrows. So her sister is essentially the only. What was that? Not you squirting random liquids, Miss P. Louise. Miss Mamas, what's going on? You sick? Familiarity. Coat, right? Oh, what color was that? No. Why is it so dark on me? Many of her regular really blue? And many of her regular climates. What? He does not apply. I was going to say apply for divorce. Is that right? Probably not. No, you vow. Now this is something that really works from her girl. Child will attend I can't say private. I can't say private today. Jesus is itching up under this wig. Oh my God. And tells her that Rose, of course, accepts, and for what am I saying? For what? Greatly appreciative of the I was going to say opportunity, but offer tried to come out, and yeah. Bella, quit you moving my light, girl. Bella is down here moving the lights. Really, Bella? Hold on, mommy. Both of them are trying to get up into this chair. Both of them, right now. Really? Don't snatch my wig off. I haven't shown y'all Blue in a minute, and he obviously wants to be seen. So here he goes. He looking like, hey, y'all. And now, of course, because I'm holding him, Bella wants to get up here. Like, y'all are really doing a lot. He want to get up here and lay down. Sir, I'm trying to film. No, you're not trying to bite me. Girl, I knocked your tooth out, and you just got those. What? Who are you talking to? Excuse me? And honey, nope. See, you got to get down because now you're trying to lick off my progress.